I'm going to kick this video off with the construction of our habitat for our Springbok and our Common Ostrich. Now, what we've been doing so far in the African area is building within a very large circle that I created using some pathing a while back, and I've been using some concrete kind of templates for habitats, but this one's going to be larger. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a wooden log barrier at the back, just to mark out the rear part of this habitat. I'm then going to have it come down towards the path, and the barrier that's going to be closest to our guests, the one right at the front, is going to be a chain link fence. This is going to allow for greater visibility for our guests, and we can also have this be a bit lower at the front because both these animals have quite a low requirement for the barrier. I believe it's 1.25 meters, so we can have the front barrier be quite short without worrying about them jumping over and escaping. In my last video, we built a habitat for the Thompson's gazelle, and in that we used a few different African decorations and stuff, but primarily these kind of tube-like things that we put over the posts of the barrier right at the front. And I'm going to do the exact same thing here using the African decorative rock number 1, because it's kind of like a pillar with a straw fan at the top. I really like how it looks, and I think it's going to just fit in quite nicely. Masking these posts on chain link fences and stuff is a really easy way to make your fences look just a bit more customized, a bit more like it belongs to you in your zoo. It just makes it seem unique. It's really easy to do, just need to use your advanced move tools to move it over the posts and then move on to the next one. Before I move on to the next bit, I would just like to say at the time of recording this video, I'm only 11 subscribers away from reaching 600, and this is really exciting. So if you enjoy the videos that you see here and get a little bit of value from them, please consider subscribing and joining the subscription base that we have here. I really like talking to all of you in the comments. It's a great little community we're building. So yeah, please consider joining that group, and we'll get back to the video. When it came to adopting the animals for this habitat, I actually had a white leucistic ostrich in my rewards section from a community challenge a couple months ago now. So I'm going to be using that as like our head honcho for the common ostriches. And when I went to look for more common ostriches, there were actually quite a lot of leucistic ones on the market. So in a weird kind of twist of fate, I decided to buy leucistic females to go with my male. I don't normally buy leucistic animals. It feels kind of wrong to do that. But I thought it'd be kind of cool to have ostriches that are only white, and hopefully their chicks will only be white as well. And then we'll just have this weird, like, snowy looking ostrich family. So yeah, these guys are all leucistic, but the Springbok are just completely normal colour morphs. Actually, never mind, that's a lie. I accidentally bought a leucistic male Springbok, and the other male Springbok has a different colour morph as well. So it looks like we've got a bit of a lucky dip with the Springboks. Now, for the hard shelter for these animals, I decided to do something a little different to what I normally do, and that is to just use some blueprints. I decided to use the African shelters as I think they look quite nice in the corners of these habitats, and I quite like the open space that they present. It's not quite as closed off as most of my habitat houses would be. They've got large window areas without any glass in them, which for the Springbok will allow extra access. I guarantee they'll start launching themselves through that. I just like this open feel. I am going to lay down just a tiny bit of hay and then move on to placing the rest of the enrichment items. But before I can do that, of course, we need to carve out where we're going to have our water. And as usual, I use the push tool and then flatten to surface to get a decent depth, and then smooth out the edges to make sure that it's not too stark a slope. These animals won't just be falling in, they can walk in nice and gracefully. I need to do this water layout first because it's going to inform where we're placing our enrichment items and stuff. It will make a difference. So it's always important to get these water sources in first. If you're using a natural water source, that is. If you're using a water bowl or a pump, by all means, just place all of them at the same time. But as I'm using a natural water source, it's always better to place it so that we know where we can place our enrichment items. And with the animals that we've got going in this habitat being quite different, the enrichment items are quite different as well. At the back we're going to have a forage box, which is only going to be used by the ostriches, and then there are going to be a bunch of smaller toys like the grab ball or the ball feeder that is primarily going to be used by the springbok. There's going to be a large variety of items in this habitat, including our beloved hanging graze feeder, which of course I will later sink into a tree to make it look like a branch shooting off of it rather than just a man-made L-shaped wooden bracket. Whilst we're waiting for our animals to arrive at the enclosure, there are a few things that we can do, such as adding this habitat to the Africa work zone to ensure that the zookeepers and stuff actually go to this habitat and feed the animals. We can also place some donation bins and some general waste bins, along with some lovely benches for some people to sit down and view these ostriches from afar, because I think this is quite a nice area to sit down and just watch all of these crazy animals just running about. And as the ostriches and springbok arrive, we apparently enter the wet season because it starts to chuck it down relentlessly. But with the arrival of our first springbok, we can start to make any terrain distribution alterations that we need. That was a lot of shun words, wasn't it? Terrain distribution alteration. Yeah, okay, whatever. These guys need quite a lot of short grass, which I'm very grateful for because I'm not overly fond of the long grass. Personally, I think it just looks a bit, I don't know, tacky almost. So quite grateful to kind of get rid of most of that using short grass, and then we'll get the ostriches in and see if it matches their needs as well. And fortunately enough, the ostrich is completely happy with the terrain distribution, which means we can move straight on to the best part of any habitat build, and that is the plants. However, for this particular habitat, we're not going to get to have that much fun with our plant distribution, and that is because the coverage that these animals need is so low. You can really easily go over that and it will start to reduce their welfare, which is not what we want at all. So what we're going to do is work a lot with rocks, and the first place I'm going to be using them is on the border of the foraging box. If you've watched my previous videos, you may know how I like to bury my mud pits and foraging boxes using rocks to kind of blend them into the environment around them, because for me, I don't like that wooden frame. I think it looks way too man-made and just kind of like it's been plonked on the surface. But if you use thin rocks to kind of cover that up and then use larger ones to blend it into the surrounding area, it looks a lot more natural. So that's what I'm going to do with the forage box, and then it's going to be a matter of placing a few trees, a few little clumps of grass, and maybe 1 or 2 flowers. And that is really going to be it for this habitat because it's quite restrictive in terms of the coverage. I don't really like building habitats like this. It takes away from the fun a little bit because I really like to build with lots of plants and stuff. But it does present a challenge, and the challenge is always useful. Before I put this into time lapse, which you will then get a Floki wildlife fact for each of the animals, I want to tell you the Floki wildlife fact, well, a bonus Floki wildlife fact of the ostrich, because this is my favourite animal fact of all time, something that I tell a lot of people. Yeah, I don't know why I tell so many people. But, right. Collective nouns. They're just pretty cool in general. We've got some really good ones like a murder of crows. That's creepy. A court of owls. Also creepy. It turns out birds just have the best ones in general, because my favourite collective noun for any animal is for the ostrich, and that is a wobble of ostriches. I mean, come on, how good is that? A wobble of ostriches. It perfectly describes how they move. It's just brilliant. Okay, I'm going to stop talking for a bit, pop this in time lapse, and I'll be back afterwards so we can start to build an African themed picnic area. So you know how I said earlier about the fence being able to be lower at the front of the habitat because animals can't get over it? Well, due to my rock placement, they actually can. Looking at the heat maps, they can quite easily get over it. So I lower the rocks to remedy that, but that doesn't really do anything. We had a little series of escapes from our Springboks in particular. The ostriches were fine, but these Springboks, they just wanted to go out and chill with the guests, which was pretty funny. So yeah, we had to make certain sections of the barrier at the front just a little bit higher to keep those little rascals inside. With the habitat complete, we can go over and start our African picnic area. And what makes us think of Africa more than a blanket of snow? Yeah, it's kind of ironic that this happened when I started to build the African picnic. Now, this area is going to be largely made up of African-themed blueprints that are provided to us through Frontier. It's not something that I'm going to be making. I'm going to use the large shop fronts and the small shop fronts, and we're just going to have a couple shops here and there, starting with the Pip Shot Smoothie and Bernie's Bakes. Over the top of that, we're going to place the large African shop front, kind of, what do you call it, a shell? That doesn't sound right, but the blueprint that you can whack over the top of these. I'm then going to put down an information kiosk because our guests are kind of on the lower end for education, and I think this might boost it a little bit. I'm not entirely sure. I'm also going to add a gulpy energy stand as well because guests are low on energy. I don't know if that's going to help that, but it might. And they're always complaining they don't have enough to drink, so we're going to do that as well. With the melting of the snow, it became obvious to me just how strange the sand paths looked. They looked a bit too forced. They've got quite straight edges, which is very strange. So I'm going to go over to our terrain editor tools, and I'm going to use the soil brush, the light soil in particular, just to kind of blend out the edges, kind of blend it into the surrounding grass a little bit and make it look a little less man-made. And to make sure that this doesn't all descend into chaos and we have guests running everywhere, I'm going to use African fence number 2, which is this lovely log-like fence with some giraffe patterning on it. I really like this fence. I'm just going to use that to divide up the area a little bit and make it clear where guests are to queue if they want to access a shop. It was also at this stage that I thought that maybe the guests would need to go for a wee once they've had all of this to drink, so we're just going to add a little African toilet, the small one in particular, off to the side of this picnic area. I did try and squeeze the large toilet block in, but it really is large, it is massive, and I couldn't fit it anywhere, so we went with a small one. Now, what is a picnic area without some picnic benches? I think it's just dirt, really, isn't it? So we need to add some picnic benches. And what we're going to do is we're going to add African picnic bench number 2, which I really like. I really like this patterning on it. We're going to add 6 of those to the front kind of portion of this area. And then we're going to line up the African picnic canopy number 2 as best that we can with these tables. And fortunately, they have diamond-shaped holes in the top of the table. And the mast to these parasol kind of things are rectangular, so they fit in there quite nicely, and it allows you to know like exactly where these things need to go. It's a really good indication of if it's in the right place or not, because sometimes it's a bit tricky to kind of figure out if it is in the exact right place, but this hole makes it so much easier. So yeah, we're going to place a few of these over every table. Now it's on to the fun part, and that is to start decorating. And I'm going to place this African off-road vehicle, this Jeep looking thing, in one of these kind of fenced off areas. We're not going to ask how it got there and why it looks so abandoned. We're not going to ask that because we might end up with some rather sad answers. I am also going to use quite a lot of the African themed statues, starting with the giraffes. I really like these because it reminds me of when I went on holiday as a child to places like Cuba, which is kind of ironic because obviously Cubans don't have giraffes, but yeah, you know, this really traditional kind of sculpture of giraffes in particular, it's really quite common. You see it in a lot of shops and such. I don't know, it just screams Africa to me, even though an African person probably thinks it looks a bit stupid, I don't know. But yeah, I'm going to place a couple of those, and then I'm going to place this massive lion statue thingy. Looks like it's been made out of recycled material. I really like that. I'm going to put that in the other alcove kind of area that we made with the fencing. It's just something to look at, isn't it, when you're queuing up to get yourself a cupcake or a smoothie. Yes, that's what the other place was. yeah, I think it looks really cool in there. We're also going to use the African sculpture of elephants, the nice wooden looking sculptures, right at the entrance to this area. We're going to have one adult elephant, and then we're going to use both of the calf sculpts. You get them mirrored so that they're coming from different directions, which is really good because it can look like they are coming round either side of the mother elephant, which is exactly what I wanted. Now, as I was a little bit sad about not being able to place loads of plants in our habitat, I'm going to do it here instead. This front area where the path is really close to our main path, we're going to separate them using African daisies. We're going to use the lines of them to begin with, and then the smaller clumps to just fill in the gaps and make sure that this area looks nice and colourful. As for the rest of the area, we are going to fill it with some desert themed rocks, some date palm trees, a bunch of drin grass and some Nitaria bushes. Now, to ensure that this area doesn't get blanketed in snow again, I'm just going to add a couple heaters under the ground. I don't care if our guests are sweating their arms off or whatever, they're just going to have to deal with it. This area is going to be hot. It's Africa. Yep, okay. After that, this area is complete. Thank you so much for having watched this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel to see more videos like this appearing in your subscription feed. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.